Hey, what's up guys? John here. 9 months ago, I covered a story about an Indian couple that moved here with their children. They purchased their first property in California. They leased that property out short term because they were already in the middle of a lease and they were unable to leave that lease. And ultimately, the tenant took over the property. They stopped paying rent. They Airbnb'd the property and just simply put all the profit in their pocket. And they've yet to be able to kick them out. And now they're looking at foreclosure, right? So this is a very bad situation for a first-time buyer, having never been able to actually take over the property and to potentially lose the property in foreclosure. But it gets deeper than that. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a new Airbnb scam. There's a lot of new scams going on right now. We're hearing about them with PPP loans. We're hearing about them with stimulus. We're hearing about them with unemployment. Well, now Airbnb and real estate scams are going wild. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a massive scam that's happening right now. And if you're an Airbnb investor, you're a property investor, or you want to be, stay tuned because you're going to learn a lot. Please hit that like button. When you hit the like button, YouTube's going to share this content with more real estate investors to educate people about all the loopholes and what's going on really in this market that the mainstream's not talking about. Generally, when we hear about money-making schemes, our first instinct is to think that it's the landlord, it's the investor, it's the entrepreneur that's coming up with this loophole to profit, right? In most cases, that was the truth. That generally did happen, especially in places like New York City. However, this is all changing. Right now, there's a young gentleman named Rafael Toledano that was recently, and when I say recent, I mean today, barred from New York. He's no longer allowed to purchase real estate. I didn't even know they could do that. Simply say you're not allowed to buy real estate in New York for 5 years because they don't like his business practices. Yes, he's an aggressive guy, by nature. He's a real estate investor that goes after a lot of big buildings, a lot of trophy properties, and does whatever he has to do inside of his business plan that may or may not fit inside the law. But recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, he was interviewed. They asked him, how much money are you worth? And he was pretty candid with his response. And now, fascinatingly, it's a really unique chain of events that led us to where we are now. Because the same mindset that went into these investors and entrepreneurs 5 years ago is now found in a lot of tenants and now found in a lot of young people that are looking for creative ways that they can advance their lifestyle without coming out of pocket and trying to compete in the overall traditional capitalistic environment we live in. Meet the Wolf of Airbnb. His name is Conrad Beecher. He's 30. He's making a fortune allegedly running an illegal Airbnb operation in Manhattan while skipping out on hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent, according to several landlords who say they've been menaced by the self-styled hustler. The short-term stay tycoon has several instances claimed COVID rent hardship and tried to strong-arm buyouts from landlords. Now, if you don't know what a buyout is where a tenant will say, okay, I will leave if you give me X. So in an example in Los Angeles or New York, that amount could be $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, or even as much as $200,000 or $500,000. Simply because the cost for that landlord to fight it in court, plus all the losses that landlord is going to suffer from the beginning of that negotiation until an actual move out, it could be in the sum of $200,000, $300,000, $500,000, depending on how much the rent could be. It could be $1 million if rent's $25,000 or $30,000 a month, and court systems are backed up and they're incurring $250,000 or $300,000 a year just in losses. Right? They're going to essentially lose their property if they don't negotiate a deal. So the tenant is in the strong position, whereas the landlord in the past would have been in a much better position. Knowing the eviction ban and court's backlog gave him the upper hand on property owners' claims, he's using the eviction moratorium against landlords knowing it'll take months or even years to evict them, basically just making even more profit, said one landlord who requested anonymity because he fears reprisal. In court records, Beecher has denied running illegal short-term rentals, even though his Instagram page indicates he considers himself the Jordan Belfort of Airbnb rentals. When contacted by The Real Deal, he did not respond to questions about specific allegations against him. The Wolf of Airbnb, it means someone who's hungry and ruthless enough to get on top of the financial ladder, he wrote in a text. They're compared with ferocity to that of a wolf because wolves are territorial, vicious, and show no mercy when provoked. On Bycher's social media accounts, influencer-style photos depict him enjoying private jets, exotic vacation spots, but court records paint him of a different picture. A deadbeat who won't pay his rent and refuses to leave when his lease expires. In legal filings, owner claims he owes roughly $450,000 in back rent dating to February 2020. In at least 5 different instances, Bycher has made hardship declarations saying he couldn't pay his rent because of the pandemic, court records show. Landlord Michael Aaron filed lawsuits claiming Bycher owes more than $223,000 for 4 apartments in West Harlem. Bycher rented the apartments in early 2020, but he didn't pay and refused to leave the units a year after his lease expired, according to the filings. Based on what my property manager has told me, he is using the pandemic as well as the eviction moratorium with not paying rent while he successfully Airbnbs the apartments and profits from every single room, in addition to adding illegal bedrooms to maximize his profits. Most of the apartments are in Upper Manhattan, a few in Hell's Kitchen, and on the West Side. So he's essentially just going around leasing all of these apartments, not paying any of them. So it's a business with no expense, and he just rents them all out for profit. Any repairs on the property, it's the landlord's responsibility. They have to facilitate these repairs by state law, regardless if the tenant is or is not paying rent in the state of New York. But exactly where Bycher rests his head is something of a mystery. In fact, he and his attorney have gotten 2 lawsuits thrown out because landlords' process servers couldn't track him down to properly serve him. One landlord claimed in court records that Bycher is believed to stay at luxury Maya rental tower on West 42nd Street. Landlords claim in addition to unpaid rent, Bycher's Airbnb operations have led to city violations to their properties. Short-term rentals without the owner or regular tenant present have been banned in New York since 2011, when state lawmakers made it illegal to rent out a full apartment for fewer than 30 days. That hardly curtailed the use of sites like Airbnb and VRBO. However, so in 2016, the state made it illegal to advertise short-term rentals. Enforcement has continued to be difficult, though, and is mostly focused on landlords, although illegal short-term rentals are commonly orchestrated by tenants as well. The mayor's office on special enforcement has gone after property managers and owners suspected of illegal hotels. The Department of Building can issue fines up to $7,500 per infraction. In 2020, Airbnb's settlement with the city, in which the company agreed to share listing information with the host, names, phone numbers, addresses, and other details in places that they rent. Airbnb debuted as a public company. Later that year, its earnings report showed net income of $834 million in the third quarter, up 280% year over year. Now, what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a change in the landscape of how and what is legally allowed simply by the policies and laws that are set in place. In New York right now, if you were to evict a tenant, I was reading an article about this recently, that the judge will do everything in their power by giving rental declarations and other forms that they can sign to get extensions and to push out these lawsuits from actually being successful. Right now, 1/10 of the evictions are happening in New York, although the eviction ban has been released. The eviction moratorium has been released. Only 1/10 of them are actually going through than before the pandemic began. So you think about that. How could that be possible? 1/10 of the evictions happening after rent was negotiable. Really, it was optional for the last 2 years. It's because of the change in policy. So the learning lesson here is that everyone should understand the landlord-tenant laws and the regulations and restrictions in the markets that they operate in, because we are going to see a lot of foul play on both sides, both the landlord and the tenant side. And it's very important to understand who you are going to do business with and what your rights are as a tenant and as a landlord inside of these markets. Drop your comments below. Let me know what you think about this Airbnb scam as well as what's happening right now in the real estate market. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.